Top 10 exorcisms in island penitentiaries. Sharks' remoteness from the rest of the world and chilly or strong currents are just some of the obstacles that make breaking free from island prisons difficult if not impossible. However, these same characteristics make such settings ideal for prisons, particularly those reserved for the most violent and predatory killers, rapists, and thieves. While some such sites are also used to keep political prisoners whose only offense may be their inconvenient ideological viewpoints. For the most part, the governments that chose the places on this list were correct. The islands were appropriate settings for correctional institutions. Escape was extremely unusual with the exception of a couple of these island prisons. In practically all other cases, just a few captives at most, and usually only one or two, were able to successfully flee the sometimes harsh, ugly, and dangerous prisons to which they had been consigned. Here are the stories of a few brave souls who risked all for a chance at freedom, however ill-deserved it may have been in some cases. Number 10. Roy G. Gardner. As Sean Roberts points out in Who's Who of McNeil Island prisoners, the United States Federal Penitentiary on McNeil Island housed many of the country's most dangerous criminals. Among the convicts were bandits, sociopaths, murderers, and con artists. The Birdman of Alcatraz, Robert Stroud, 1890 to 1963, resided there from 1909 to 1912. Charles Manson, 1934 to 2017, a federal guest at the jail from 1961 to 1966, and Alvin Old Creepy Karpas, 1907 to 1979, who lived there from 1962 to 1969, were among the convicts. For those who were familiar with the area, escaping the 17.27 square kilometer, 6.63 square mile, island off the coast of Tacoma, Washington was tough but not impossible. The main problem was crossing Puget Sound. Although the island is about 3 miles east of Steilacoom and spans the sound from east to west, its western side is only 700 yards from Key Peninsula, with some of the water between the two being shallow enough to wade. Up to 100 inmates have escaped from prison or worked details throughout the years, but only around a dozen have made it over the sound. The others drowned and perished as a result. Roy Gardner, a railway thief, lived from 1884 to 1940 and was one of a dying breed. According to a Sky History article, he is best remembered for escaping from McNeil Island, which was considered America's most secure penitentiary at the time. Two dupes, both inmates, were unintentionally complicit in his escape. He persuaded them that escaping as a group would ensure their safety. He stated that safety was found in numbers. There weren't any security, shot all three of them. Gardner was the only one who just sustained a mild leg injury. He was able to swim to a neighboring island and become a free man despite his wounds. He went back to his old ways after being placed on the FBI's most wanted list, attempting to rob a train again a few months later. He was apprehended again and sentenced to a fresh 25-year term. After failed escape attempts at 2 other prisons, he was moved to Alcatraz in 1934, where he remained until his release in 1936, planning another escape until committing suicide 2 years later after publishing his autobiography. Number 9. Clement Duval and Henri Charrière. Emperor Napoleon III, 1808 to 1873, ordered the construction of Devil's Island Prison in 1852. The little island, which is part of a chain off the coast of French Guiana, has long been a shelter for violent criminals, including murderers and rapists, as well as political prisoners. According to Australian news reporter Kate Schneider, prisoners worked from dawn to dark, chained by day and shackled by night, some creating houses including their own 1.8 x 2 meter wide 6 by -6.5 foot quarters. Guards frequently allowed conflicts among convicts to go unpunished in order to reduce paperwork, according to Schneider. Rations were so scarce that several became walking skeletons. If someone died in a dispute, the body was thrown into the water and a bell was rung to attract sharks. The few who made it to the mainland had to battle the rainforest's hazards, which were exacerbated by the harsh shark-infested seas. It was a living terror, said prison guide Herman Clark, especially when you consider that 3/4 of the 70,000 prisoners died here from sickness, hunger, and abuse. Only Clement Duval, 1850 to 1935, and Henri Charrière, 1906 to 1973, and his friend Sylvain were able to depart successfully. Duval, who eluded capture in 1901, spent the remainder of his life as a refugee in the United States. He chronicles his experiences in his posthumously published book Outrage, an anarchist memoir of the penal colony, 2012. Papillon. Henri Charrière's loosely autobiographical, ostensibly partially fictional book chronicles Henri Charrière's and Sylvain's escape, 1969. Number 8. Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris. According to the FBI, 3 inmates escaped from Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay. According to their discoveries and information from a 4th prisoner who was meant to join them, Alan West, 1929 to 1978, John Anglin, 1932, and his brother Clarence, 1931 to, designed and carried out an amazing escape plot over the course of nearly a month, June 12 to July 11, 1962. They made dummy heads out of human hair, painted them to look like the men's faces, and set them on their beds to look like the men's heads sleeping. The ruse fooled the guards at first, but when the escape was detected, the prison was closed and an inquiry began. After drilling holes around the frame of the air vents at the backs of their cells, investigators discovered that they damaged sections of their cell walls and entered the unguarded service hallway that ran behind the cells. The passageway led to their cell block's roof, which was inside the prison. According to the FBI, they set up a secret workshop on the rooftop. The fugitives created crude tools from anything they could find, such as converting a musical instrument into an inflating device and creating a periscope to keep an eye on the guards as they worked. In the ocean, rubber sealed letters from the fugitives, bits of wood resembling paddles, and a makeshift life vest were discovered. The life vest, like the men's 4x14-foot rubber raft, was made from 50 raincoats purchased most likely through loans by the guys. The men broke open the ventilator above the ventilation shaft, ascended to the roof, descended the prison bakery's chimney, crossed the ground, scaled a fence, and launched their raft from the island's northeast shore, planning to cross Raccoon Strait and join Marin County. To this day, no one knows what happened to the fugitives. Is it true that they've made it to the mainland? Where have they been since July 11, 1962? If that's the case, crossing the bay would have been impossible due to the strong ocean current. According to West, the men intended to steal clothing and a car once they arrived on the mainland, but no such crimes were reported at the time of the escape. The fugitives' family did not earn enough money to be able to financially assist them. The FBI has never found credible evidence to imply the males are still alive. Despite the fact that the Bureau closed the case on December 13, 1979, it left a mystery unresolved. Nobody knows what happened to the inmates who fled the maximum security prison on Alcatraz Island. Following their escape, there have been many reports about their whereabouts and lives. Number 7. David Stuurman. During the late 1700s and early 1800s, David Stuurman, 1773 to 1830, led the fight against British colonialism in South Africa. He and the Khoi and Xhosa peoples he led were seen by the British as threats to be conquered. According to cultural activist Stephen Langtry, Stuurman was arrested and charged with fighting colonial control as well as opposing the conscription of the Khoi into militias that were organized to defend the colony and to attack the San and Xhosa peoples. The British imprisoned Stuurman on Robben Island off the coast of Cape Town, South Africa, where he managed to escape twice. He got away for the first time by taking one of the whaling boats anchored in the harbor and hiding among the Xhosa. After being recaptured a second time, Stuurman was sentenced to hard labor on Robben Island. He did, however, manage to flee again, this time in a capsized boat. Despite his survival, he was captured and condemned to the same island prison, where he was chained to a wall while waiting to be transported to Australia, where he died 6 years later, unable to return home due to a weak right leg. His grave was lost when the cemetery where he was buried was redeveloped into Sydney's central train station. Number 6. Matteo Boe. In one of the cells of the unlikely appearing Italian prison that stands one step away from the turquoise sea, as an e-borghi.com story defines the correctional institution's environment, the bandit Matteo Boe resided. The robber Matteo Boe lived in one of the cells of the unlikely-looking Italian prison that sits one step away from the turquoise sea on Asinara Island, which spans along the most northwestern coast of Sardinia. The prison's clay roof tiles white walls that reflect intense sunshine and dark blue doors and window frames that mimic the rich color of the cobalt blue sky give it a pleasing if incongruous appearance. Instead of looking like a prison, the institution has the appearance of a beach resort. The cell doors are the same dark blue as the window frames on the prison's outside walls, as are the frames of the small windows above them and the numbers painted on the white walls beside the cells. The only hints to the location's purpose are the padlocks and chains. Former Cosa Nostra head Tito Riina, ex-Camorra commander Rafael Cutolo, and of course bandit Matteo Boe were among the detainees despite their outward appearances. According to the story, the prison was also a safe haven for the late judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, who were detained in protective custody until the start of the Maxi trial. With the help of his cellmate Matteo Boe, the first Asinara Island prisoner to ever escape utilized a rubber boat to flee the Italian Alcatraz. Until Boe's breakout, the penitentiary system was thought to be escape-proof. The maximum security jail was closed in 1998. It is now a major tourist site and is part of the Asinara National Park. Number 5. There are 76 fugitives on the loose. A Pacific archipelago off the coast of Mexico known as Mexico's tropical Alcatraz. The escape-proof Isla Maria Federal Prison Colony has been the site of no less than 76 escapes, according to Danielle Ong's Latin Post story about the facility. She may have fled because of the institution's abuse, disease, forced labor and torture. President José de la Cruz Porfirio Diaz Mori, 1830–1915, decided in 1877 to create an island prison colony akin to Alcatraz in the United States. In the hopes of boosting local prosperity and national pride, the federal penal colony of Isla Marias was constructed in 1905. 6 of the island's numerous escapees attempted to use plastic containers as floating devices but were arrested and returned to Alcatraz in the tropics. Bribes to officials and other staff employees, including the Reyes Servin brothers, members of a well-known kidnapping family, may have aided those who were successful in their escapes. By 2019, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador had had enough, citing high maintenance expenditures and the island's penchant for devastating tropical storms. He apparently closed Isla Marias without mentioning the island prison's proclivity for escape. Number 4. Interns from the IRA and other organizations. From 1840 to 1880, Spike Island, just outside Cork, Ireland, near the harbour's entrance, was a stopover point for convicted criminals heading for Australia. According to Diarmaid Ferreiter, author of On the Edge: Ireland's Offshore Islands, A Modern History, the island prison began to house offenders convicted by courts-martial under the Restoration of Order in Ireland Act beginning in 1921. In November 1921, 7 inmates escaped during the night. The inmates' tunnel work as well as communication with pals on the mainland aided escapes. Contact was made through an intermediary, the boy who followed the priest saying Mass in the internment camp, according to Patrick Burke, a Waterford IRA volunteer who assisted in the tunnel's construction. The tunnels, on the other hand, were not necessarily a method of escape. According to Ferreiter, 5 detainees were allowed to wash along the seaside while on a labor assignment. They slid away through the open door of a stable as the party walked through a farmyard, but they were protected by a large man in front and behind. Number 3. Vladimir V, Tchernavin. After escaping from a prison in the Solovetsky Islands, ichthyologist Vladimir V Tchernavin, 1887–1949, wrote I Speak for the Soviet Silent Prisoners, 1935. He was condemned to 5 years in prison after being found guilty of wrecking by advocating price increases for specific materials and industrial equipment in 1931. There are no fees listed. His account of his captivity as well as the specifics of the Soviets' interrogation methods which included withholding food, sleep deprivation, privilege revocation, solitary confinement, extended questioning sessions, threats of execution, and torture is horrific. Tchernavin's wife Tatiana was also detained and imprisoned by the Soviets, adding to the pressure on him to confess to his alleged wrongdoings. Tchernavin's escape from the prison island is described in the last few chapters of his book. Tchernavin made sure that one of the sites where he planned to flee was near where he planned to teach about and lead many projects linked to fishing at various locations throughout the far north freezing district of Murmansk Oblast, Russia. When he got at this spot, his wife Tatiana, who had been released from prison, and their child were waiting for him. The family set off in a leaky rowboat repaired by his own hands, Tchernavin recalled. Without a compass or map, they journeyed over rugged mountains through forests and marshes to Finland and freedom. Tatiana recounts their escape in greater detail in her 1934 book Escape from the Soviets. Number 2. Billy Hayes. In 1970, writer, actor and director Billy Hayes was arrested for attempting to smuggle a few kilograms of hashish out of Turkey. Hayes was condemned to life in prison for his activities, but he escaped after only 5 years on the island prison where he was confined. Hayes described his ordeal as getting myself into jail and getting myself out. After dropping out of Marquette University 3 times and illegally importing 2 kilos of Middle Eastern hashish concealed in a phony leg cast, according to David J. Krychek's newspaper story on the issue, he became a drug smuggler. Hayes was imprisoned in Turkey's Sagmalsalar prison in Istanbul following the 4th attempt during a succession of coups and insurgencies. When Hayes decided to go, the U.S. government was working behind the scenes to secure his release at his parents' and the media's request. For a bribe, he was moved from Sagmalsalar to Imrali Prison Island in the Sea of Marmara. Only a fool would attempt a swimming escape from Turkey's Alcatraz. Krychek contends, therefore convicts were allowed limited freedom. When a storm prevented delivery staff from using boats, Hayes, a strong swimmer, utilized one of the rowboats used by delivery crews to bring supplies to the boats, which they then delivered to their customers. He then rowed to a group of supply vessels anchored in the water. He pretended to be a Turk once ashore, then took a bus traveling west for 100 kilometers to the Maritsa River, which separates Turkey and Greece, swam the river and surrendered to officials at the U.S. consulate in Athens. Midnight Express, directed by Oliver Stone in 1978, is based in part on Hayes' exploits. Number 1. Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte was imprisoned on the entire island of Elba, which was suitable given his status, the exiled emperor's jail. According to historian Aaron Blakemore, after being defeated and ousted at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, Napoleon (1769–1821) signed the Treaty of Fontainebleau, relinquishing down his royal property as well as his and his descendants' right to reign. He was able to preserve his emperor title and chose which island he would rule because to the same treaty. Elba, which had been a part of France until Napoleon's rule turned it into a principality, was his option. The Polish Countess Marie Walewska became his mistress and followed him to his new domain. They lived in a villa built by the Medicis overlooking the bay as their primary residence, with a second residence set aside for them as a summer resort. Between lavish parties, the Emperor of Elba built an army and plotted his escape from the island. Through continued links with staunch friends in France and visitors, Napoleon learned of his own adherents' preparations to rebel against King Louis XVIII, just as those who did not support him conspired to exile Napoleon to the more remote island of St. Helena. The emperor was worried that he would be forgotten after his death, but his mother, who was now a member of his Elba people, encouraged him to fulfill his destiny. On February 26, 1815, Napoleon traveled back to France followed by a flotilla of ships carrying 1,150 loyal subjects. According to Blakemore, his brave prison getaway paid off as he arrived in Paris as a hero. Before succumbing to defeat at the Battle of Waterloo and being exiled to St. Helena, Napoleon regained control of France for at least 100 days.